2001. The PlayStation 2 is to turn a year old, and 2 planes will hit... Wait, hold on now. And the most important gaming exhibition in the world, E3, will show off games that will go on to be considered some of the most influential of all time. Ico, Devil May Cry, Silent Hill 2, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, Hurdy-Gurdy, Metal Gear Solid 2, and Jak and Daxter, the Precursor legacy. While I could happily talk about any one of these games, in this video I want to talk about the Jak and Daxter series. We'll explore the making of the game, its inspirations, and of course, what it's like to play and to have played way back when. In order to do that, however, we have to go forward to the following year and to my native land, the Emerald Isle. It's 2002 in Ireland. We've switched to a new currency, got into the World Cup for the last time, Gorbachev came over for a pint, and Bertie's plans for a big stadium are abandoned.
The Hearn machine has had a difficult few years.
But in the mind of a young Pepp and his slightly less young brother, something more significant was to happen on the Christmas morning of that same year. We got a PlayStation 2. And along with it, Gran Turismo 3, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and Jak and Daxter, the Precursor legacy. Now, for the developers, Naughty Dog of Crash Bandicoot fame, the studio's design philosophy remained much the same as it had with their previous games, one of them being to push the new generation of hardware to its limits, just like they'd done with Crash Bandicoot, where they effectively hacked the hardware in order to utilize it to a level other studios, or even PlayStation themselves, hadn't anticipated.
Memory was so short in Crash Bandicoot that I took to stealing little bits and pieces of extra memory from the Sony libraries.
This is Andy Gavin, co-founder of Naughty Dog, creator of the Goal engine, and also a complete f***ing genius. Much like with the PlayStation 1, the PS2 had a whole host of new problems to solve with its bespoke architecture, which is why, for the first year after release of the console, many studios struggled to optimally use the PlayStation 2's unique Emotion Engine processor, as it commanded a new approach and workflow in order to be used to its full potential. But Naughty Dog were basically just like, large open world, full day-night cycle, not a drop of fucking loading screens, oh, and she's gonna run at 60 FPS the whole fucking time. This was all done using Naughty Dog's own coding language called Goal, and it is ultimately what allowed them to make Jak and Daxter not just have no loading screens, but to be the first to do it. And they continued using Goal for the rest of the trilogy and Jak X. Interestingly, because both Daxter and The Lost Frontier for the PlayStation Portable were outsourced to other studios, neither of these titles would use Goal, which may or may not explain some things.
Unless Naughty Dog comes back to make the real Jak 4, I don't want it to exist. Not after this. God, no. And it's just a shame people forgot about The Lost Frontier, because we need to make sure that this doesn't happen ever again.
The Goal engine also ended up creating some major issues for the studio Mass Media, who were tasked with the job of remastering the trilogy for the PS3.
Just getting it to run at all was almost a miracle.
These are the eyes of a man who knows pain. Let me tie this up in a nice little bow for you. So Naughty Dog were harnessing the power of spooky wizard magic. And, well, yeah. We'll get into the other core philosophies of the game shortly, but first, let's get into the actual story. And there's really no better way than just watching the first 30 seconds after you hit new game.
I have spent my life searching for the answers that my father and my father's fathers failed to find. Who were the precursors? Why did they create the vast monoliths that litter our planet? How did they harness eco, the life energy of the world? What was their purpose, and why did they vanish?
As you can see, this game wastes no time setting everything up. Who are these Precursor lads? Why have they left a bunch of shite everywhere? And how did they go about using this magic oil stuff before disappearing never to be seen again? Oh, and by the way, here's the lad who I think is the key to solving absolutely everything, and his annoying friend. And so we are introduced to Jak and Daxter, who are in the process of pulling a bit of a Simba by going to the one place they weren't supposed to go.
Must never go there.
And naturally, in doing so, we encounter the antagonists of the game, Goal and Maya. who are preparing with their army of lurkers to invade Jak and Daxter's home village. Things take an even worse turn when Jak takes a tumble in a bid to defend himself from a lurker using an IED, or improvised eco device, causing Daxter to get knocked into a giant vat of dark eco, from which he re-emerges as, what I'm told, is an otzel, a combination of a weasel and an otter, which upon discovering, Daxter is none too pleased.
Instead of heeding my wisdom.
And neither is Samos the Sage, Jak's mentor and narrator of the opening monologue, who tells the lads the only person who can fix Daxter is far deep in the north and hasn't been contacted in a long time. And getting there involves traversing some lethal terrain. And this is when we're introduced to Kira,
Heat shield.
who explains that if Jak helps the local villagers, they can offer him power cells, which will allow him to use Kira's hoverbike, it's actually called a zoomer, to traverse the hostile northern terrain. And so the game begins. We step into a portal and are somewhat seamlessly brought to our first section of gameplay, where we're hit with some spicy Crash-like jungle music from Josh Mansell, composer of all the Crash Bandicoot soundtracks.
This device is a communicator. With it, my father and I can...
Will you shut up? Now that we're watching Jak in motion, it's the perfect time to circle back to one of the other core design philosophies Naughty Dog had for this game, and that was a tack-sharp focus on fluid, cartoon-like animations that blend together if interrupted, all while feeling responsive to control. Now, while Jak and Daxter was technically brilliant on many levels, the movement to me was certainly the strongest suit of the game. To play Jak and Daxter even now, you'll find it still feels and looks good to play, and is a clear upgrade in practically every way over Crash Bandicoot. Whether you're spinning, double jumping, ground pounding, or doing that slick little roll jump thing, traversing the world just feels good.
We're looking for impact that couldn't possibly be achieved through conventional means like motion capture. We want to see the character jump and stretch to twice his height, or if he's punching, we want to see that fist be twice as big as it normally is.
The man who you just heard speaking is Mark Cerny, who has since been lead architect on both the PlayStation 4 and 5. Trivia aside, many influences for these stretchy, elastic animations came from the likes of Disney and Pixar. Animator John Kim was the man responsible for practically all the initial character animations for the Jak and Daxter prototype, and took inspiration from a character you may know.
One of the things that I drew as far as inspiration was Abu, Aladdin Abu. He was squirrely, he was literally just all over Jak. In Aladdin, is all over the main character. And he would do the same thing in the game. If he does a spin kick, he would spin around him and he'll string back and come back like a rubber band. And all that ideas, I think, heavily for me as an animator came from Aladdin.
Look at Daxter shivering. That was a John Kim touch.
And while we're on the topic of inspiration, there does seem to be one game that stands above all for Naughty Dog.
One of the things when I first saw Jak and Daxter, one of the things that really jumped out at me was finally we're doing, Mario 64. Because when we were making Crash Bandicoot and Mario 64 came out, we were just like, oh, we were absolutely floored by what we were seeing on the screen. And when I first saw Jak and Daxter, it was like, okay, now we can do that kind of a game.
But this was really Mario 64, but given reason and given continuity.
The continuity is undoubtedly a strong suit of the game, as we've previously explored. As for the reason, it's all fairly straightforward stuff. Generally, you're going to be helping various eccentric characters across the world with their problems in exchange for power cells. Ooh, Crash Bandicoot Easter egg. Whether it's restoring power to the village for the mayor, who's going to claim all the credit for it.
Oh, what a wonderful sight! I thank you. And the entire village will thank me.
Heard some yak cows for a tired old farmer. And yes, that is a yak and a cow. Crossbreeds seem to be a bit of a thing in this game. Capture and return a man's pet muse, his source of inspiration for his sculpting.
Little furry dude!
Help a down on his luck fisherman.
After what I try, I can't seem to catch a single fish in this river.
This one actually involves its own minigame that's a bit of a pain in the hole to win, but by doing so, you'll be rewarded with eternal, gleeful laughter from the fisherman.
You did it! You caught 200 pounds of fish!
Anyways, I think you get the picture with some of these missions. There's also a bunch of situations where you can just pay people with Precursor orbs in exchange for their power cells.
Bring me 90 orbs to get me back on my feet and out of this barrel, and I'll give you a power cell in return.
While it is all pretty simple, the characters you encounter all have stellar designs and voice acting, and it keeps things interesting whilst you're on your travels. And some characters are maybe even a bit too enthused at times.
Them monsters patrolling the ocean took a bite out of me fishing rig, and now they're gobbling up me catch.
Some poor sound engineer got his ears blown out his arse that day. Apart from helping villagers, you're also out to find the sages, who are all titled according to their specialization in a certain eco. So there's the red, yellow, blue, and of course, Samos, the sage of green eco. Each of these ecos have different properties that all tie into gameplay mechanics. Green eco heals you, blue eco makes you faster, red eco makes you stronger, and yellow eco lets you shoot fireballs. It's the hunt for these eco sages that'll take you through the many diverse biomes of this game, from the idyllic Sentinel Beach to forests, tundras, caves, mines, volcanoes, you get the idea. I'm sure I share the same sentiment with many when I say that Sentinel Beach was my favorite area in the whole game. There's a calmness about it that I just find so peaceful, and ultimately, when I think of this game, it's this location I'm brought to. Another thing I want to touch on briefly is Jak and Daxter's character designs. As many are aware, the key to a good character design is to have a recognizable silhouette, and not to overcomplicate. And for Jak and Daxter, this is done to perfection. From his extensive head of hair, to his big ears, the goggles, shoulder pad, and down to his hobbit feet, he's immediately recognizable. And even more so when we add Daxter on his shoulder. Combine this with the use of a select few colors, the yellow hair, blue tunic, and Daxter's complementary orange fur, we get a duo that can be heavily blurred out and still be recognizable. And this is why I've used a very minimal thumbnail for this video, much like my last. I think the distinct characters speak for themselves enough that when broke down to their most basic components, fans will still know immediately what they're looking at. And this is going to be really awkward if this video gets like 10 views. Moving forward with gameplay elements, you've also got multiple driving sections on the previously mentioned Zoomer bike, where you'll be going through terrain full of lava that requires you to stay off the ground as much as possible, while also hitting balloons to keep your heat shields running. There's also areas where you'll need to avoid explosives or hit into enemies, and classic time trial scenarios. The bike handles pretty well and makes for a nice change of pace from all the platforming on foot. Oh, and you've got the Flut bird section, which I guess you could call a vehicle. And yeah, if you're wondering, it probably is a crossbreed of something. And of course, there's bosses. They have slick designs and animations, but they're not very difficult as they all have the same formula of avoiding their attacks until they exhaust themselves and give you a window to attack back, which you then repeat a couple more times to win. So yeah, while not particularly difficult, it's not like we're expecting Dark Souls here anyway. Which brings me to the final boss encounter. Gol and Maya take control of the Precursor automaton in the hopes that they can use its power to open the Dark Eco silos, and in doing so, will allow them to shape the world as they see fit. This is particularly unfortunate for Daxter, as you learn that Gol is the sage of Dark Eco and the only person who can turn Daxter back.
Oh, great! I get to help the guy that turned me into a furball destroy the only person who can turn me back!
And so it's finally time to take on the big bad. Gol and Maya are actively trying to break open the doors to the Dark Eco silo with the Precursor robot, and you are going to stop them using the various different colored ecos you've come across on your travels. Samos quickly realizes that Jak will not be able to stop them alone, and so the sages combine their eco powers to create
White eco! That could be the stuff to chain me back! Or it might stop that robot. Stay fuzzy, stay for work. Choices. Okay, fine. We'll save the world, but do it quickly before I change my mind!
Harnessing the powers of the white eco, Jak deals the final blow to the robot, causing it to explode, sending Gol and Maya flying into the silo right before the doors are shut behind them. And there you have it. Jak and Daxter do a little victory dance, everyone says great job, and Daxter cockblocks Jak. Roll credits. But wait, there's more. For the completionists out there who've collected every single power cell, you do get one extra little cutscene to close out the game. It was actually this game that made me realize what a completionist my brother was, and how it's probably for the best he stopped gaming before achievements became a thing. Anyways, once you've given the gateway all of your power cells, we're given this final, ambiguous moment.
Wow! What is it?
It's so beautiful.
By the Precursors.
And so we're left on this mysterious cliffhanger, awaiting answers from the sequel to be. Overall, Jak and Daxter really was a game that raised the bar for the PlayStation 2 era in many facets, yet still kept that classic platforming feel. And in many other ways, it was also the end of the platforming era as we knew it, which is why Jak II was such a radical shift in both tone and gameplay to appeal to the young gamers who were growing up and naturally wanted to shoot and steal more things. Thanks, GTA. Honestly though, Jak II was probably my favourite of the trilogy, and I do hope to make a video on that game soon. As you've seen, this video is titled, It's Time Jak and Daxter Came Back, and so far, I haven't really addressed that, so let's take a moment to do that. Personally, I would obviously love a new Jak game. I think it's fair to say the franchise did not end on a good note, with a title made by a different studio, different engine, and different gameplay, not to mention a different console. With all these factors considered, there's a lot of people who either didn't like The Lost Frontier, or like me, never even got to play it in the first place due to not having a PSP. And by the time the PS2 port had landed, I just knew I didn't like the look of it. It's a hard sell to play a game made for a portable console on a much more powerful one with a bigger display, because you already know from the jump you're getting an experience that has had to go through a lot of cutbacks in order to get it to fit and perform on the limited hardware of a portable console. No one wants a sequel to be a downgrade. So with all this considered, I think it's pretty clear that I would love to see this series get a fitting send-off to end the franchise on a high note, and I know I'm not alone in feeling that. I also want to quickly mention the Open Goal project, where a group of devs have just recently managed to release a version of Jak and Daxter that runs natively on PC, not an emulation, so I'll leave a link in the description for that, as they're continuing to work on the following games. So anyways, thank you for watching, consider subscribing if you'd like to see more, drop a like, and maybe even follow me on Twitch.